Thank you so much for coming, everybody. This means a lot. I really wish that Kaylee was here, but she's on a plane coming back from 14 days of solid work in Vancouver. I want to thank Jared Boland for coming in her place at the very last minute. And I want to thank Jess and everyone at Type Books. It is not only incredible that we are back to in person, but that we have this space. It's impossible for me to walk into a bookstore without buying books, so at the very least, you're gonna make money from me every month. And of course, I want to thank Kathryn, Kuitenbrouwer, Paola, Ferrante, and B.H. Brian Panhuyzen for coming and helping us launch this in-person event. I am going to acknowledge the land on which we are broadcasting, I guess, before I read the bio for Paola and we get started. Junction Reads exists in Tikaronto, which for thousands of years has been the traditional land of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabe, including the Chippewas and Mississaugas of the Credit. It is still home to many people, many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are very grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community on their territory. I'll just let you know, we're gonna have the readers talk. For anyone who's been here before, we used to have 4 to 5 readers. We've limited it now. We're gonna have 3 readers. And then we're gonna have a break, at which point we're going to raffle off a bundle of their books and a very generous gift card from Type Books, which will give you an opportunity to go and buy some books, maybe their books, and have them signed before we return for the Q&A. If you haven't already bought raffle tickets, Jared is going to be there all night for you to load up on them. Okay, without further ado, Paola Ferrante describes herself as a writer living with depression. Her debut poetry collection, What to Wear When Surviving a Lion Attack, was shortlisted for the Gerald Lampert Memorial Award. Her latest poetry chapbook, The Dark Unwind, was published by Knife Fort Book in 2022. Paola was longlisted for the 2020 Journey Prize. She won Room's 2018 Prize for Fiction, Grain's Short Grain 2020 Prize for Poetry, the New Quarterly's 2019 Peter Hinchcliffe Fiction Award, and other work has appeared in various literary journals, but most importantly, the Journey Prize Stories 32, Best Canadian Poetry 2021, and the Masters Review Anthology, Volume 9. Paola has been described as a vital new voice in short fiction. Her Body Among Animals was published by Book Hug Press just recently, and she joins us from this neighborhood.
Let me know if you can hear me, because I tend to have short people problems with the mic. I just want to say thank you so much for having me here. It is my neighborhood, and I'm so happy to be able to read in my own neighborhood. I'm so happy that Toronto has a neighborhood reading series, because so many of them went away during the pandemic. So it's nice to be back. It's nice to be in person. It's not nice to have static in your mic, so I'll step back. I thought since it's spooky season, I'm going to read a semi-ghost story to you guys. I'm going to read a part from Mermaid Girls, which is a longer story in the collection. And this is a world where funhouse mirrors show your deepest, darkest desires, and where girls can grow memory tales, especially if they work for the nefarious Mr. Marvelous and his aquatic emporium of underseas adventures, like Lucille did before she disappeared. When we start this story, the 12-year-old narrator, Emma, is going down to the lake with her neighbor, Roger, who is a little bit of a nerdy boy, who likes to get mollusks out of the lake, and whom she has a crush on. He takes my hand, and for a second, he leans in closer to me, and I think, this is it. I'm going to kiss him. I think I want to kiss him. And I'm trying to figure out how to adjust the course of my mouth to his mouth while correcting for the gravity of my stupid nose in order to prevent an unceremonious crash into his faint upper lip hair when I see something in the lake behind him. I tell myself it's probably just a plastic bag floating through the reeds. And it could just be the wind from any direction causing standing waves on the lake, or maybe even the tidal pull of the moon. Even though it's moaning now, I tell myself firmly that it's just tinnitus, like what they thought the Apollo 11 astronauts were experiencing when they heard that ethereal wailing. Whatever it is, flipping around out there in the water, it's not a mermaid. It's definitely not a ghost. What star are you looking at now? Roger asks irritably. I'm not. Roger likes to explain that, unlike dung beetles or baby sea turtles, mollusks don't orient by the light of the stars. I've seen a mermaid once before. It was a lot like seeing a ghost. It was after Mom left, the day Dee and I crouched on the stairs to the basement where Mom used to sleep way into the afternoons on the couch wedged between the still-packed boxes labeled kitchen and baby stuff. We listened to Dad yelling on speakerphone. How could she have kept him in the dark like this? Mom said he should have known. She used to be a girl alone in the dark, staring up at celestial bodies in the night sky, until she ended up staring into the pools of our father's eyes, blue like the lake, with the sky reflected in it. Then, like the lake, it was hard to breathe. It's not like you could breathe in outer space either, our father screamed. Hadn't she wanted a house and a family? Dad said this was everything she said she wanted. How could she say their marriage felt like a black hole? I tried to picture Mom leaving with Dr. Robert, but I couldn't. Even light disappears in a black hole. Just come home, Dad pleaded over and over. Don't you want to come home for the girls? Mom had taken her clothes, her telescope, her binoculars, her sextant, her star charts, and all the work she had done with Dr. Robert on the need for isolation training to populate Mars. She'd kissed us and told me to make sure Dee didn't get into too much trouble. Even though Dee, at 11, was 3 years older than me, Mom said that sometimes she made less sense than the ridiculous upside-down position Poseidon put Cassiopeia in when he banished her to the sky. But Mom left her planisphere. Its date and time were set to October 23rd, 5:39 p.m. Standard Time, minus 1 hour for daylight savings, when the next solar eclipse could be seen in the northern hemisphere. It was a message, Dee was sure, clear as any almanac. She'll come back, Dee kept saying. I know she'll come back for us. Dee had a plan. No way was Mom going to miss the eclipse. And if she was staying at Grandma's, she'd watch it from the same spot she always took us to on the lake. If she saw us about to stare directly into the sun, you bet she was going to come do something about it. The time Dee, Mom, and I were going to see our first partial solar eclipse, my sister and I got into a fight about who got to stand next to Mom and tore apart our paper plate viewers minutes before the eclipse. Mom had to tie our scarves around her eyes so we weren't tempted to look up, then hustled us back to the car. When we got home, Dad said he didn't understand what the big deal was. At least we didn't go blind. But Mom was screaming. Oh, of course you're right. Of course it's nothing. There'll be another one visible from this hemisphere in, another 20 years or so. Her face had crumpled. You're right, David. It happens all the time. Who I am is being eclipsed all the goddamn time. The afternoon of the eclipse, Dee and I snuck out of the house, leaving behind the new pinhole projectors Mom helped us build out of old Cheerio boxes on one of those rare afternoons she was in isolation training with Dr. Robert in the study, or doing a pretty good impression of a slow, zero-gravity space shuttle to the couch and back. It was freezing by the lake in October. I stood there, feeling about as warm as astronaut pee when it hits the vacuum of space, and I thought, this is it. Come on, Mom. Come and save us. You have to want to save us. She's coming, right? Dee said, shivering. Of course she is. She just can't see us yet. It was me who decided we should go farther out, to the highest point of the lake visible from shore, the island at the center. I knew the water was cold, but I figured we could still make it in time for the peak of the eclipse, since it was a fairly short swim. I slipped into the water, but Dee dove. Mom, who never really knew how to swim, used to warn us about not diving in head first. You have no idea what's in the water. For a long minute, Dee stayed underwater. Come up, I prayed. Come up. When Dee finally surfaced, she looked dazed. We made it about halfway to the island, but by that time my sister was almost blue, and I tried to do the huddle position. 101 astronomy tips and jokes for girls definitely hadn't covered that in their tips for a solar eclipse. It's a lot harder to wrap your arms around each other's backs and intertwine your legs when you can't even feel your own toes. Then I saw Mom. She was wearing a long skirt, and as she waded into the water from the island toward us, it twisted and tugged, getting tighter and tighter until the skirt was her skin, and then her skin was scales. Knee-deep in the sunset water, her fishtail glistened like an otherworldly thing, reflecting a perfect Roy G. Biv rainbow. She made a wild animal sound, wading deeper, thigh deep, waist deep, past her shoulders, getting slower and slower as her fishtail dragged her toward the bottom. By the time she grabbed us, she was disappearing below the surface. I dimly remember thinking I had done this. She was trapped, and I was going to drown us all, and I started to cry. "Look up," she screamed. "Keep her head above the water." All I could think of was how, when Mom first started working with Dr. Robert, I'd gone into the study when I wasn't supposed to, taking a bunch of papers and a pair of scissors off her desk, intent on creating a family of mermaid paper dolls, a mer-mom, mer-dad, and 2 mer-daughters, all covered in shells and scales. When she'd found me, she'd slap me across the face. Then she started crying herself, saying, "I'm sorry, I'm a bad mother. This isn't me, I don't want to do this." But somehow, she dragged us to shore. In the morning, she was gone. Again. There was a wet, empty skirt on the kitchen floor, as though, in the middle of that night, our mother had shed that skin. I want my sister to tell me I'm wrong about what I saw at the lake. I want her to tell me it's impossible. I don't want her to go to the lake tonight. But her eyes light up like Sirius against the early evening sky as she sits cross-legged on her bed. The mirror is now playing a dream involving a handsomely tattooed pirate massaging a piece of gold over and over until it elongates into a woman. "Emma, I love him. Of course I'm going to the lake tonight. Maybe you just saw the ghost. Who knows? Maybe I'll see her too." I don't understand why my sister wants to think the ghost is real, or why she'd want to see her. When I glance at the mirror, it switches scenes to a tropical underwater landscape from the perspective of a piece of gold buried alive in a treasure chest, but Desiree doesn't notice. "Dee, what does the sun say to the moon?" "I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation." "What does the planet Venus say when she falls in love?" Dee counters, dramatically opening her bottle of nail polish and turning the radio on to some cheesy pop station. I groan. All the songs are love songs. "I don't know. Roger and I haven't even kissed yet." "I'm over the moon," she says dreamily, only half painting her big toenail. "And he's so marvelous. We had the most magical evening last night." Love, the radio informs us, is a battlefield, or a curse, or a disease without any cure. I'm not sure if it's also love, but my sister has a pimply rash starting at her calves, and in the dim light, I can't tell if her toes are just swim wrinkled or actually slightly webbed. Was there always that slight flap of skin between her little toe and the rest? Was that what love did to you? I try to remember my sister's feet in sandals. I wonder if her pseudo flippers are just another part of how my sister is changing, the kind of change that makes Dee wear bras that remind me of Roger's mollusk shells, the kind that makes her care about boys but not meteor showers, the kind Grandma keeps threatening that I'm going to go through soon too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paola. And apologies for this amplifier. It's either that I've got it plugged in wrong or this microphone was $14. I don't know. I don't know what the root is. I think it's worse for the author, so I apologize, Kathryn and Brian, for getting the feedback while you're up here. It'll be better in November. B.H. Brian Henri Panhuyzen has published 4 works of fiction: The Death of the Moon, a collection of short stories; Night is a Shadow Cast by the World, a novel; and 2 novels from ECW Press, The Sky Manifest, and what we're going to hear today, A Tidy Armageddon. Other short fiction appears in various literary and speculative fiction magazines. He wrote for the Just for Laughs Comedy Festival and has penned and performed stand-up comedy. When not busy running his company, he is a passionate amateur musician. He lives in Toronto, the East End, where he lives with his family, both human and animal. And I want someone to ask about this, but he writes on a Dvorak keyboard. Brian, thank you for coming to Junction.
Thank you. I'm going to read from A Tidy Armageddon. Just to give a little bit of background to it, it's a story, a post-apocalyptic story The world has ended, civilization has been destroyed, but not in the way that we're used to. It's actually a very neat destruction. Everything has been hyper-organized into this vast grid, and these characters, who are soldiers, but they are sort of a misfit group of Canadian soldiers, emerge on the prairie into this remarkable scene, like a maze, where everything has been stacked up into homogeneous blocks of the same item repeated. Helicopters, watering cans, and everything else that humanity has created, all organized into this grid. The story is about consumerism, it's about relationships, it's about trauma, it's about found family as well. It was 100 kilometers to the border, and after 5 days of walking, they reasoned that they had crossed it, moved from Canada into the United States of America. Nothing indicated fact. Not the sky's hue, the weather, the smells, the birds, rodents, insects, the creeks or rivers, or the fish in them, the stout grasses growing in the passageways, or the nature of the maze itself. During their southern transit, they passed blocks of crib mattresses, boxer briefs, CRT televisions, theater popcorn machines, empty toothpaste tubes, 8-inch floppy disks, drafting tables, harbor boys, lipsticks, hand-cranked pencil sharpeners, as well as miscellaneous packaging materials and all manner of unidentified parts for the maintenance and manufacture of cars, trucks, aircraft, kitchen cabinets, refrigerators, septic systems, conveyor belt mechanisms, eyeglasses, and so on. The goddamn border is gone, Wakely growled. He was struggling with nicotine withdrawal, had to admit an apocalypse was a hell of a way to enforce abstinence. Even the idea of the border is gone. That's all it ever was, Virago said, an idea. A colonial idea which severed indigenous groups, Sharpcott added. Hey, you know what no border means? Deeks said. Patriotism is done too. The way I see it, you can be proud to climb a mountain or better still, cure a disease. Being proud of where you come from is for losers who can't accomplish things. Like I'm sure that pile of rocks over there is proud to be American. Tse broke in quietly by stating, you know what else is gone with the border? Border agents. Surly, power tripping. You've been randomly selected for additional security screening, waste of DNA, border agents. After a pause at the uncharacteristic venom in Tse's tone, Deeks added, also gone, AstroTurf. It's in a block somewhere, Wakely said. We could make a quest, find the AstroTurf, and burn it. And frozen yogurt, Virago said. I will never have to eat frozen yogurt again. Parking tickets, Sharpcott said. No more of those. Being on hold with Air Canada, Tse said. Yeah, I bet they're no longer experiencing higher than usual call volume, Deeks laughed. Police brutality, Virago said. Police, also politicians. And billionaires. We don't know where the people are, Sharpcott reminded them. Yeah, but even if they're still alive, they're no longer billionaires, Virago said. Wouldn't you just love to come across the Walmart family right now, Deeks cried. I make them crawl behind us carrying our rucks. CEOs, CFOs, and CTOs, and earnest but clueless human resources people. All gone, Deeks said. And lawyers, oh my God. Money too, Sharpcott said. It's here somewhere, but its value is lost. Just stuff now, matter, which is all it ever was, Leclerc reminded her. A concept we all agreed on, Sharpcott noted. Loans, debts, anyone owe on their credit cards? Student loans, behind on mortgage payments? All gone and done. Taxes, Deeks noted. Oh my God, we never have to file another tax return. Maybe the apocalypse was worth it. So it's no longer death and taxes, just death, Tse said. Half our certainty is lost. They walked south, deeper into what was once America, passing among hitch-mounted cargo racks and switchblade covers of plastic and steel and wood and brass. Then batting cage pitching machines and chafing dishes, beyond which they saw some distance to the west the top of an unusual stack constructed from cylindrical towers, smokestacks maybe, arranged short to tall, forming a kind of bell curve, out of place among the flat-topped blocks, and they changed their vector to investigate. They walked past upright pianos, all glossy black. Deeks popped the lid on one and played 2 minutes of boogie-woogie, then shut the lid and continued on without comment. They passed between old steamer trunks facing a wall of backyard hot tubs, scenting the air with chlorine and sweat, and at the end of the aisle arrived at the mid-block of those clustered towers, which turned out to be lighthouses. They stood bunched shoulder to shoulder like refugees, far from any lake or sea, a few meters taller than the surrounding blocks, their columns round, square, octagonal, made from stone or brick or concrete or welded steel, painted white, red, gray, yellow, blue, or candy striped. And they smelled of the sea, a salty, fishy smell, some with their bases stained with grime, soot, green with seaweed, moss, others barnacled where they'd stood in the surf. When the section looked up, they saw the light rooms, all with glass intact, a testament to the assiduousness of the accruers who had arranged them here, but their beacons forever dark. Deeks stepped toward the closest lighthouse, a red one with a door of dark copper and a latticed peaked window framed in black arches. She rapped the side with her knuckles and Leclerc pronounced it a dodecahedron, 12 sides formed from plates of cast iron. Deeks read haltingly from a black plaque with brass lettering. Onder de Regering van Willem III, Koning der Nederland, ends. Danish? Wakely asked. Dutch, Leclerc replied. So this thing is from Holland, Sharpcott said, now standing in North Dakota. They looked up its column, a trio of windows leading to a gallery bristling with masts and antennae. This structure crowded by neighbors where it once stood alone gazing out at the North Sea. Deeks tried the door and found it locked. They moved along a passage with lighthouses on their right and steam trunks, then cell phone cases to the left, counted 70 or so lighthouses until they reached the one at the corner, more than double the height of the Dutch lighthouse. This one, a truncated cone constructed from granite blocks. Sharpcott found the door unlocked and opened it and went inside. She looked up a cylinder circumscribed by a winding stone staircase. She mounted the first step and began to climb. The tile walls echoed with the sound of boots on stone, light increasing as they rose. She passed a big window deeply recessed in the thick walls and surrounded by granite and pale blue tile. Neighboring lighthouses obstructed the view, and as they rounded upwards, gripping the iron railing, they passed another window with a prospect of the cell phone cases. Up they went, looking through windows as they passed, momentarily seeing an improving vista of surrounding stacks. But they didn't pause long, anticipating the prize at the top. Nearing the summit, the steps changed to iron, and they rose through a curving staircase into the light room, a cluster of Fresnel lenses in the center and views in every direction through the tall windows. The sun following into the west, a red globe, and above it a streak of cloud like a neon strip, which Sharpcott mistook for a jet contrail, her heart fluttering, but it was only cloud. The lantern room was hot, a greenhouse cooked all day by sunlight. Sharpcott saw through the windows a descending spiral staircase to an outdoor gallery. She found a handle and turned it, and a hinged section in the glass swung outward, and she stepped into the evening air, descended the stairs to a narrow gallery. She propped her rifle against the wall and rested her arms on the granite railing and looked out at a sea of blocks.
A Tidy Armageddon is an incredible novel. There is a section early on in the novel with plastic spoons that I literally had to put the book down and go, oh, okay, this is not good. Thank you, Brian.
Just
come up here with so much confidence and then I'm reminded. Kathryn Kuitenbrouwer is the best-selling author of novels Wait Softly Brother, All the Broken Things, Perfecting, and The Nettle Spinner, as well as the story collection Way Up. Her work has been published in Granta Magazine, Maclean's Magazine, The Walrus, that's the most recent Walrus, there's an excellent short story in there, Significant Objects, Storyville, Joyland, This Magazine, The Lifted Brow, and 7XLA. Her fiction has won the Danuta Gleed Award and been nominated for the Amazon.ca First Novel Award, the Toronto Book Award, CBC Canada Reads, the Readlit Award, and most recently was longlisted for the Giller. She is the recipient of the Sidney Prize, an award-winning professor Kathryn teaches at and holds a PhD from the University of Toronto. She joins us from a small hamlet in Prince Edward County. Kathryn, welcome.
I'm kind of scared of this.
I know.
I really have no clue. Is it okay? It's
I
not
know,
in front of me?
it's-
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jay. Yeah, you're good. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks to Type Books. Thank you to Allison. And I had another thank you, but I can't remember. Oh, to Brian and Paola. I feel really lucky to get to read alongside you both. I'm going to read from my new novel, Wait Softly Brother. This novel is an autofiction, which is to say it's both fiction and autobiography, which is to say that that makes no sense. I'm going to read chapter 2 or day 2 of the novel because it's roughly 10 minutes. And just to give context, Kathryn, the main character of the novel, has just left her marriage, which I also did, and she has run away sort of stupidly to her parents' house in the hope of finding some solace for this life-changing event that has transpired. She's a writer, as I also am, obviously, and her plan is to investigate, by interviewing her mother and father, the death of their first child in a stillbirth. As you might imagine, this does not go super well for her. So this is day 2, and I'll just show you this picture of, this is actually my mom when she was 20, on the, I think the first day of her honeymoon to my dad. She did give permission to use the photograph, in case you're worried. Her parents in the novel live north of Belleville. My parents do not live there. The pig shed boxes contain multitudes. A photograph of Mom, 20 years younger than I am right now, newly married, and just before she became pregnant with Wolf. I hold it up and she grabs it from my hands. In the Poconos, she says, they had these honeymoon packages, heart-shaped beds, everyone there newly married. It was a place of blissful beginnings. We have the same body, I say. Those are just my legs. Well, I certainly do not have that body anymore, she says. No, I say, nor do I suppose, but what a babe you were. I was a catch, she says, squinting at it, and so happy. I peer into the frame, willing it to give me more, to offer up its story. I have never seen my mother smile so openly as in this picture. Maybe we can put the best pictures aside and make an album and get rid of the rest. Oh, her mom's basically said that she has to clean out like all of the detritus from their entire lives in this old house in order for her to stay there. But no, my mom will not get rid of photographs. There is something particular about them, some magic to them that makes them impossible to burn or bury. We will archive them, she says. By mid-morning, we have worked our way through 1.5 small shoeboxes. The material in the pig shed seems suddenly insurmountable. We will never succeed in cleaning it up. Wasn't it one of Hercules' labors to divert a river to clean out a barn? Tantalus, she says. No, Mom, he was the guy with the rock. That was Sisyphus, I think. At any rate, maybe the question to ask is, will you miss it? Or maybe will someone else enjoy it more than you? How can you know what you will miss before you miss it, she says, just when it's too late? And I can feel the dig, so I stop and glare at her for a bit. She's impervious to my moods, though. She has been barricading herself from them for as long as I can recall. I am her creation, so whenever I misbehave, she just carries on until I adjust to whatever she expects. That way I get to maintain my role as transgressor instead of occupying the one I would much prefer to occupy, that of being myself. What exactly are you working on these days? She finally asks, by way of oiling the crank in our conversation. Autofiction, I say. Mom's eyebrows flare, whatever that is. It's sort of memoir, I say. And how do you expect to write a memoir, she says, given your memory, I mean. Mom and Dad used to say that if my head weren't screwed on to my body, I'd forget where I left it. There will likely be lacuna, I say. That is kind of the point. She nods. Since it's about Wolf, I say, and I see her freeze again. We keep telling you, there's no story there. She huffs a bit, and then shrieks a quiet, that's my story, which is factual. Wolf is her stillbirth, her old wound, her story. I do wish you'd stop all that nonsense. The nonsense of the writing or the nonsense of leaving Matthew, I say. It's all the same, isn't it? This is a curve I hadn't expected. The thought that she sees clearly how one thing unleashes the next, how thoughts cascade into actions, how vulnerable we are to our traumas as we write. One is the other. It's all tangled together. You won't solve yourself by picking at this, she says. I dare then. It's just this, Mom. I was telling this friend of mine, she's a sort of therapist, about Wolf, about your stillbirth, and she said it's common for mothers to be depressed afterwards, especially when they don't have support. I never had time to be depressed, she says. You came right afterwards. That is my point, I say. It occurs to me that you might have had a lot of unworked through grief and who knows, self-blame. I don't mention that some of this unworked through grief has become her legacy to me. Instead, I pull out another box, crack the tape with my Opinel knife. It's a box of porcelain women experiencing pastel motherhood, drinking tea and wearing long swirling gowns in meadows. It's a box of idealism that the Royal Dalton brand invented to keep women nostalgic and thoughtless. Charity pile, right? I say. These are going in my bedroom, she says. Why do you hate women so? What I hear is, why do you hate me so? I love you, Mom. I love women too, I say. I just wish I wish they wouldn't buy into this. Buy into having pretty things, she says. Yes. Well, no, that's not it. What is it then? Mom, what if all the women did what I'm doing? Left their families? Left mediocrity, I say. Left unhappy situations, sought joy. I'm not unhappy. Why do you get to proclaim that we're all unhappy? Maybe there are a lot of happy women in happy situations. Besides, what would the men do? I laugh, of course, because what would the men do? And as I laugh, my eyes catch hold again of the photograph of my mom at 21, her smile opening up the universe. I pick it up and smile back at her. Do you remember who you were? I say. It's a long time ago, she says. It's true. She's an old lady now, thick with age, but still attractive. I wonder if these happy memories sustain us in unhealthy ways, I say. There you go again. It's not because you're unhappy that the rest of us have to be too. I'm not even sure I care about happiness, I say. And then I hear Dad pushing a wheelbarrow into the pig shed. I care about freedom, I say. I care about my body rediscovering joy. And Dad, because he would do almost anything to avoid conflict, says, load her up. And because we would do anything to avoid dragging him into this, we comply. For days, I haul bags of photographs and document boxes from the pig shed, and we pour through them, deciding what to file, what to throw away, and what to keep. Everything I think I might be able to use, I set aside to digitize, promising Mom that I won't damage anything and that once I'm done, I will archive everything in plastic bins, safe from mold and from the rains, which have incidentally not abated. Toward the end of the week at breakfast, Mom ceremoniously hands me a manila envelope. It's for your memoir, she says. Some correspondence mailed to your great-grandfather. You might as well have it. It's about his father, Russell Boyd, who would have been your great-great-grandfather, though there was little great about him by all accounts. I was thinking this would help you with the Civil War bits of your book. He fought, you know. They say he was cuckoo, even before the war. First of all, Mom, I say, we don't say cuckoo anymore. And second of all, you're kidding, right? Nothing is really known about him, she says, like she hasn't heard me. Well, a little is known. I'm not writing a family history. I'm writing an extended fictional essay about my dead brother. She purses her lips in that dangerous way she has. I have crossed a line. She says, you never know. You might need it, and starts to walk away. I look down at the envelope in my hands. I pull the letter out. It's on blue airmail paper. There's another envelope inside the first. The gist of the note on the blue paper is that the enclosed, much older envelope was found in an archive of dead letters at a post office being dismantled in Richmond, Virginia in 1969. The archivist is certain we are the proper recipients of this letter. Wait, I say, was I there the day this came in the mail? Oh no, you'd have been at school. Private Russell Boyd is the name on the front of the envelope, and he is in fact my great-great-grandfather. He was more or less disowned by the family, Mum says. He was insane. He was institutionalized after the war. I gently pull the older letter from its envelope. It's foxed and yellowed, brittle, a scrawl of dainty gray quill pen cursive. Dear Private Boyd, I do not know why you did what you did, and I suppose you must have reasons of your own. For my part, I wish I never was tangled in your business and you never got tangled in mine. And yet if you send me back my rightful property, I think I can carry on some. Otherwise, wee Charles requires new breeches and a decent flaxen shirt. Please do send money and news when you can. Sincerely, Christiana Mulden. My God, I say, have you read this? Who was she? I think she was a mistress. I hand the letter to Mum. I'm really not planning to write anything particularly historical, I say. I do not want this. This is the last thing I want. She pushes my arm away. Throw it out if you don't want it. Bait. I am stupid. I bring the letter up to my room, sit on the bed and read it over. It smells of some kind of perfume, rose maybe, and dust, and a hint of barnyard, which might be its years of sitting in the pig shed. I know Mum gave me the letter to distract me from my fixation on Wolf, but I won't be waylaid. I tell myself this, but who am I kidding? The thing has its hooks in me already. They say that everything you write, just like everything you dream, is a replica of you or your unconscious self. They say you can't write a character who is not, in some true way, an aspect of yourself. If this is true, then all fiction is autobiography. All writing is self. Maybe I can find a way to Wolf this way. Maybe it's the only way to him. I set the letter on my dresser and sit down to write. I try to become Russell Boyd, my mentally ill ancestor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. That novel was so engrossing and captivating. I read it in one sitting, and that says a lot for me because it takes me. I still have a book that Kevin lent me that 6 months ago, I think. So Type Books, Jess, has graciously given us a gift certificate in the amount of the 3 books being read from here today. You don't have to use the gift card to buy the 3 books, but after I finish talking, we're gonna have about a 5-minute break, and you could get Kathryn, Brian, or Paola to sign those books. I don't think they'll sign any other books. And I also have, thanks to the publishers, Jay is one of them. There's 2 book hug books in here from Catherine Mockler's event a couple of weeks ago. So I'm going to raffle off these first, and the winner can get them signed. And then I will raffle off the gift card in the amount of $77.64, I think, is what it is. Jess, thank you again. And a shout out, Jared reminded me, if you don't have raffle tickets, if you don't have enough raffle tickets, you can go and give him money, and we'll add the slips to the box. And all of the money goes to the authors. So that's your last chance. Damien? I'm not gonna look because some of you didn't fold the papers very well.
My bad, sorry.
Sorry, James, I wanted to insult the audience, not you. Sorry. The winner of 4 books, Paola Ferrante's Her Body Among Animals, Bryant B.H. Panhuyzen's A Tidy Armageddon, and Anecdotes by Kathryn Mockler, and Wait Softly Brother by Kathryn Kuitenbrouwer, is Sue C. And now the winner of the gift certificate in an unknown amount. Nancy. Here you go. Okay, so we're going to take about a 5-minute break. If you want to grab the authors away from anyone else who's grabbed them and get your book signed. And also, because we've got this generous space, I don't want to push anybody to buy books, but peruse, have a look at some bookshelves, and we'll be back. Thank you. And can I ask everybody, before we do the Q&A, I don't want to put anybody on the spot or to challenge your auditory. I'm happy to have the microphone passed back and forth, but how does everybody feel about having the Q&A without the microphone?
Yeah, no mind.
That's good? Okay, I know. It was $14.99.
Oh no. No. Mike was my fault.
You hear it before, you've never heard it, so suck us into it. One of the best actors I've ever heard, unfortunately passed away now. Did you ever see Les Mis?
Yeah, several times.
He
Like
was,
my favorite musical.
he was master of that.
Oh yeah.
Graham would say, I pick one person in the audience. I pick one person mentally and just look to see if they're following, see if you're going too fast. Listen to great readers of audiobooks. Christopher Moore, his books, he wrote Dirty Job, Shakespeare for Schools, The Serpent of Venice. His reader is brilliant.
Really? Okay.
You got to do your acting stuff. This is not the writer part. This is the acting part.
Yeah.
But you know, I noticed how quiet everybody was. They were very much listening to you. Bring a refillable water bottle.
Usually I have water with me. Today's good water.
Well, when you have a kid, you're lucky you can get out of the house. Okay, don't be afraid to go bigger in differentiating character voices. I would even mark up the book in different colors so that you know who you're talking. Because it just makes it.
It makes more fun.
Yeah. So here's your notes.
I remember these. Old school. I have to
So I'm going to go next time and I'll See if you
I
listen
need to
to
see my proofs.
go sign.
Yeah, I actually have to go buy them. So.
Tomorrow morning at so we'll start moving furniture in this week and next week. Yeah, that works underway right now. Well, it's planning. There's a lot of engineering. The engineers are using the designers are using the contractor. All I'm saying is, sort it out, this is what I want, we'll make it happen. Okay. Anyway, moves. Merry Christmas. We haven't covered it in the just this week, good, I'm not in a apocalypse. Wait for the winter. Yeah. That'll be race in a 5 horse. Okay. Okay. It just happens to be. Well, that's good. Hey ladies, come in together. Good. Cancel the order, right? Yeah. Well, what about Alex? Well, that's 3. You're 4. And it's 5 sisters. Scott. And it's fair. Okay. It sounded kind of cool when you were reading it. It sounded kind of cool. Randomly reach here, pick something off the shelf. Right. Yeah, a little bigger though, right? Feminists kill joy and What's the one that's looks like a monkhouse? Ooh. No, can't have one of those. Ooh. I've seen it. Oh, I saw that. You saw that. Maybe it popped up on Amazon. I never had That's your next one. I know. I got a stack. I don't have any fiction in my stack. I don't have any fiction. It's all history, politics, biography. You're gonna spend time to get caught up.
Might as well get it now.
Okay.
Back and forth almost every week. Probably. If you're here, stay with us. If you're not here,
Thank you. I like that. It's cute.
they work. But when you're there and you're going in and out and everything like that, looking around and everything, they, yeah. You know, sure I'm doing my homework, Dad. So, Lisa. Lisa. J-O-H-N, right? Like, make sure she spells it right. Thank you. So, how do you feel? Yeah. Still in the pool? Yeah. 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 Oh, come on. Oh, no. Did it swell up? Yeah. It's just. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Mine was it painful? It was at the time, right? Yeah. You need never ask. Hey, what do you need? You need ice on that? Just rest. But you can get back to the pool. Not yet. Oh, no pressure. Oh, coming out of that push. Yeah. Have you ever had the knee issue? Because I did when I was younger, I had going traffic. Yeah. Yep. I played squash. I played tennis, but I also played squash. And squash is what did it. Yeah. That happened to be a bit of a squash for me. Yeah.
She's very
Anyway, we'll just rest it up again. Let it get better. Okay. A little bit at a time. Okay. So, because she came out, the marathon is when yeah.
Excited.
Well, I haven't done anything long since Kathryn. Only 5 months. Okay, you call me. 5 minutes. Okay, good. I like it. Okay. Okay, no, we'll right. I'm good for that. I'm good for that. Right? And then. Yeah, so it's a 50-meter run.
I had an agent, so this is like a giant.
Yeah. And that's, well, I don't ever feel like it. Garbage? Yeah. Get it in. Hey, there you go. Which author are you with? You're pretty funny, you know. You're pretty funny.
My stage persona.
There you
Yeah,
go.
real life Allison's not funny, but we're gonna return to the Q&A for our Q&A. Return for the Q&A. And Jared has just told me that he is worried about the live feed not picking up words, sound. So I'm gonna hold the microphone and we'll pass it back and forth. It feels like the amplifier isn't doing what it was doing before. It's working, or it's making the noise?
No, it's working now. You don't have to pass the mic and just repeat the question. Or from them.
Yeah.
Brian, Paola, Kathryn? Thank you so much for coming to Junction Reads. It's been 3 years, and so having the three of you, having the privilege of being able to read your books, for whatever reason, for the first 7 years of Junction Reads, I would review the books really quickly because I'm a slow reader, and 4 to 5 books a month on top of everything was a lot. But in person, I gave myself the luxury of reading the books intently so that in a one-on-one conversation I could talk to the authors about their books in depth. And I did that with all 3 books, and I loved it. The only problem was I had to whittle my questions down and somehow connect them. So I'm gonna ask a few questions. Feel free at the end of a few questions, if you have something that follows up what I've said or what one of the authors has said, just put your hand up and interrupt. My next question, because I really can go on and on and on. Some people in this room know very well So as I said about Kathryn's book, I sat down and I read it all the way through. I just couldn't stop reading. But I want to talk because of how Wait Softly, Brother came to being. I want to talk to all of you about the creative impulse and how that can sometimes be interrupted. I thought about it often while reading Wait Softly, Brother, in how you had a story that you wanted to write, you had a truth that you wanted to find, and then this incredibly free to answer the question, but I want to talk about what that feels like to have your creative impulse interrupted, I guess.
I feel like somebody else should answer this question for me. Well, I mean, it's always interesting. Okay, so it's always interesting to hear how people respond to this book, because it's a fiction, and it's trussed up as an autobiography, and so often people think that the things that are autobiographical are the fiction, and the pieces that are fictional are the autobiographical aspects. And in fact, Brian and I did a reading together in Coburg, and an old friend of ours came, and she was like, that letter, like, that must have been so, like, painful for you when you opened that letter up or something like that. And I was like, I never opened that letter. I made that up. That's like completely fabricated. And so the notion of me being interrupted is, I'm glad that worked. But I was never interrupted in that way. I mean, of course, we're always interrupted as writers because we have to earn money, and writing hardly ever does that for us. But the novel, the way that it actually came into being, was kind of like this weird automatic, writing system that I started to use because I was not writing. And so a friend of mine kind of pulled me aside and said, you are going to keep writing, and I'm just going to give you prompts. And she started giving me these prompts. Like we'd go to a cafe. This is like long ago, 10 years ago. And she'd put an old key, a skeleton key in front of me, and set a timer for 10 minutes. And we would both write. And I mean, I'd been writing for years at that point, and I'm not trying to brag, but this mysterious thing happened, which is that instead of doing what I usually did, which was preconceive the whole story and dwell on it for weeks and months and then go and sit down, I just started to write. And what happened is that stories just came out without me doing a lot of agonizing. And so this novel, I did agonize over it in the long run, but in the beginning, it just started to come. And the pieces that came were the Civil War part. So that letter, and then these sort of really violent war scenes that kind of like take place, and which I pulled back on because the publisher wanted me to, but I also forcefully didn't pull back on in some instances because I'd had that requested with other books before, like that the book was too violent, and I felt that it was gendered, and I didn't want to comply to that kind of gendered ideology around what is okay for a woman to write and what is okay for a man to write. And then once I had this sort of compilation of these this weird Civil War story, which I couldn't figure out what it was, I started to think about why I was writing about a Civil War that I knew nothing about, and was kind of like basing all my writing sessions on research that I was doing, really, really haphazardly, like, oh, let's see if we can find photographs of Civil War soldiers who were wounded, and then go into an archive online and then find all these photographs and then start writing kind of like being inspired by that in some, quick way. And then I realized at some point, oh, maybe I'm writing about the Civil War because I'm in my own like miniature microcosmic Civil War in my marriage, right. And then that's how the framework kind of came into being, and it took a long time for me to figure that out because therapy is slow, and it just took a long time. Yeah. But maybe you guys have stories about. Yeah.
It's interesting how you talked about the writing process being interrupted. I have a 2-year-old. Everything is interrupted all the time. And this book actually spans, I think, about 7 years of my life. Five years, sorry. It's 5 years in the making. And I started it before I had a 2-year-old. And I ended it when my baby was about 4 months old. And It was very interesting to sort of write that last story, So What If It's Supposed to Rain? Because in that story there is an artist mother. She's an ex-photographer. She has a teenage daughter. She's living in this, air-domed community in a very rich society in a futuristic world, and she's been implanted with a robotic hive mind consciousness that is basically like your worst nightmare mother-in-law, judging her every move. And she's like, why am I having another baby? What am I doing? Why am I doing this again? And I think the tension that I was feeling as a new mom definitely comes out in that story, but I think it plays out in a lot of these other stories where women artists are constantly interrupted. There's a story, Cobwebs, where the woman is sort of trying to figure out whether to stay in her marriage, and she turns into a spider, as you do, when you're not sure about that, because her husband wants a baby and she's not sure if she wants one, and she's a visual artist. And there is another story in here called Everyday Horror Show, where a new mom is haunted, literally, by ghosts, which are sort of a metaphor for her postpartum anxiety. And she too used to work in film, and she's missing that. There's a line where she's like, I would give anything to have fake bodily fluids all over me again, because she worked in a lot of horror movies. So I think as a mother and as an artist, I'm constantly being interrupted with writing, and the key is to have these little short bursts of time where I can just grab my lunch break, grab the hour I come home and my kid's still in daycare, and just sort of tell my body, it's time to work. And I think that's really keeping me writing.
My interruption for this story was quite different. It was that I got the idea for this book in like the mid-90s. And started to write it as a short story, and felt like, oh, well, maybe it's a little bit bigger than a short story. And I'm not sure I can actually write this. I didn't think I really had the chops to do it at the time. And so I put it aside and I moved on to other projects, and every so often I would pick it up, and then I thought, okay, maybe it'd be a novella. And then I would drop it again, and then I stopped writing it completely and kind of forgot about it for a long time. But it was always a thing that sort of was nagging me, just because I always felt it was just a way to say to people, look what we're doing. Like, it was just, if you saw, for instance, I always think about gasoline. A liter of gasoline, you put 50 liters of gas in your tank, and it's like, well, that doesn't seem like very much. But if you had to buy 50 cartons of gasoline to fill up your gas tank every week and take them home and load them one at a time into your car, you'd have a very different relationship with filling up your gas tank. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole spirit of this book, is this idea that it feels like it's just an alarm call. And I got to a point where I was like, I really got to kind of tell this story because I feel like it's effective. And from people who have read it have said, that they found themselves in Costco a few days after reading the book, and they've just been overcome with a paralysis, it's like reaching for the giant bottle of vanilla or something like that, and like they can't do it. So for me, that interruption, I know we're talking about different kinds of interruption, but for me it was like an interruption until I felt like I had, first of all, the writing skill to be able to put it together, and also just to have gotten through other projects and gotten to the point where I thought, okay, well, now I'm ready to do this as a novel, because by then I had written a few novels as well, and so a novel was a possibility when before it really wasn't.
Yeah, and that all three of your books in some way have a moment that is a reminder to the reader that we are in times. In Kathryn's novel, there's torrential rain every single day, and I don't know, I won't, and choices have to be made as a result of the torrential rain. And Paola, in so many of your short stories, it's like a warning to be a better witness, to be a better person, to be a better man, a better woman. And clearly, Brian, A Tidy Armageddon, the plastic spoon scene was just one of many, but that like a wall of plastic Christmas trees, and I can't remember the scene, but in when someone says these aren't things, it's when they come to a place, these aren't things that are being used, these are things that are unused, which was like, oh, great, that's the everything that's sitting in Costco moment. I want to talk to each of you because I'm not generally a surreal, unreal, apocalyptic horror reader, but in the last couple of years, I've been, it's almost all that I read. So I want to talk to the three of you about writing the unreal, writing the kind of apocalyptic story, or including it as symbolism in your work. When you said, I'm not generally that, I was like, oh no. That's pretty much this book, with hope. And I'll get to that in a second. So I think the reason I write it is twofold. There are a lot of difficult subjects in this book. There is domestic abuse. There is, there's a very personal story about how I dropped out of graduate school because I had depression. There is the climate crisis. There is, a story where that whole climate crisis and sort of tying it into toxic masculinity and the entitlement of toxic masculinity is tied in with a boy feeling guilty about not saying anything when his brother perpetrated sexual assault. And all of those stories are not necessarily things that are really fun to read about. In fact, they're not. And I think that using sort of language of genre, using horror conventions, using science fiction conventions, gives the reader a sort of way to stay in those stories where you might not otherwise. So for example, having an abusive partner turn into a dragon. It's a lot easier to talk about a dragon. And it's a lot easier to stay with a story where you're like, is there a dragon? Is the dragon real? What do I do? How do you deal with a dragon, right? You can go on the internet, you can Google how to deal with a bear or a crocodile. What do you do with a dragon? So it gives the reader a sense of there's a place where I can understand this story from and maybe stay in the story because it's an interesting exercise in world building in that place. Or postpartum anxiety, my mother had that. We're dealing with, a woman who has postpartum anxiety because of that, and also because there is the climate crisis, and she's like, what have I done? I've just brought this new baby into the world. And so she's experiencing that as a haunting. And the language of horror movies lets me talk about, it's this terrible, uneasy fear, and it's a way to talk about sort of how that fear that we're kind of experiencing in this current moment is happening, but in a way that readers will want to sort of stay with the conventions of the story, I think.
No answer. Are you sure?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm just sort of thinking about how I want to talk about this. The whole idea of the real, this sort of idea of the real has been part of my writing practice for a really long time. My first novel was called The Nettle Spinner, and it's also has these phantasmatic kind of elements to it. And I'm really interested in old story. But with Wait Softly Brother, the ethics of that kind of I pushed it even further because thematically the book is about, or the book is interested in, let's say, this idea that at least to some extent within the structure, the confines of the structure that we all agree to live in or disagree to live in, there's room to change, there's room to re-narrate, there's room to come up with another story into which you can sort of fall and allow yourself to with abundance kind of live. And so the elements of the unreal in the book are very specifically meant to signify these kind of extra impossible, nonsensical values that aren't believable, and yet if I write it well enough, I can make it believable. And that's also to say that you can narrate your life. You can to some extent have some power over the structure or the paradigm in which we live.
And further to that, Paola mentioned hope, because leading into my next question, I think you're probably the best to kick off this conversation, because unbelievably, without giving much away, there is a hopeful ending to a Tidy Armageddon, which really surprised me. I couldn't believe that I was kind of like, oh, okay. So maybe Brian, if you want to talk about that in that, like the horror of what we're doing to the planet.
Yeah, there's an interesting tension in the book, depending on who. It's a way on whose side are you on. So, and that's a question that I often entertain, which is about: are we on the side of humanity and humanity succeeding, but then at what cost? And if we often talk about the way that we're destroying the planet and we're not going to be able to live on it anymore. And then there is, of course, a lot of criticism for this idea of going to Mars and like, we just made a mess here, so we've got to be able to expand outwards and mess up some other place. Rather than figuring out a way to actually work with the ecology and everything that we have here, which is entirely possible. It's just I'm not going to go into all the impediments to that right now, but they are self-imposed, really. So in a way, when I was writing the book, I was like, and the characters do comment on this idea that the world doesn't end, it's civilization that ends. And it's actually the best thing ever to happen for planet Earth. That once that civilization is basically wiped out, that we are, I mean, this is the language that the characters use, that the world is rid of a brief and destructive parasite when humanity is gone. So, I mean, in a way, it's a book of hope if you're on the side of Earth, but not if you're on the side of civilization. Although I should say there are some sequels in the planning, and there's some stuff, because it is a bit enigmatic, which I know has frustrated some readers, what exactly happened. But there is a story and everything like there as well. So so I guess stay tuned.
Yes. And side note, are you a Radiohead fan?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, there is
fake plastic watering cans and the tree. Christmas tree.
Yeah,
Exactly. It was fantastic.
Brian, I just really want you, I would help you do this. I really want you to do like a radical revolutionary takeover of Costco, like a reading, like a pulpit reading, you know, like just go in there with a mic, a $14 Costco mic maybe. And just, and I'll just, a megaphone, I don't know.
And plastic watering cans.
It would be so Instagrammable too, right?
Yeah, just with the song playing in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got this at a probably worst store, Best Buy. And I did try my very best to get something on Facebook Marketplace, and people just don't reply to your, is this available?
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't say, is this available? I say, hi, how are you? So Paola and
I think you're crazy.
I know, probably. That's okay, it's not untrue. Paola and I were talking about the short story at the break, and I'm a huge fan. It's all, I love them all, and I'm obsessed. And how for some reason, and maybe Jay can answer this question, for some reason publishers don't want to publish collections of short stories. And there's all this talk of everyone's attention spans are decreasing, and everyone wants to be able to, Commuter Lit, which is a great literary magazine for short story lovers. They literally have short stories published weekly that you can read on the train to work. So I want to talk to you all about short stories. You are writers of them, publishers of them, and why do you think, what's wrong with CanLit and publishers?
Hang on, this is on the internet? Don't hate me, former next juries, please. I think actually short stories are having a moment. I'm going to challenge that. I think that we have seen some short fiction collections make big lists.
Last year I was like, oh, lesser known monsters of the 21st century. Yes, you're a finalist. Loved that collection. And I think with short stories, they get a bad rap because fiction writers train first in short stories. That's generally what you do. You generally don't write a novel first. And people who are really good at writing short stories, I think their collections, I don't want to sound like I'm like bigging myself up here. I think their collections do end up getting published because they are good at a particular form that is different than a novel. There are things you can get away with in a short story that you can't do in a novel. Like I have a story in here that I mentioned before about a grad student who's dealing with depression, and she experiences it in the form of an albatross. So it's a lot of the girl did this, the albatross did this, the girl did this, the albatross did this. Yeah, you'll read that for 8 pages, but you're not going to read it for 360. Like that gets old really quick. So short stories I think are a very experimental form. I think one of the other sort of barriers to publishing more short story collections is that it's very, when I was writing this, I was like, oh my God, how many more worlds do I have to invent? And one of the issues with that is more on the literary magazine side of things, I think, where we don't see a lot of markets for longer short stories, like the sort of semi-novella length, not really, but almost there, which I see more of it in the States. You see more of it in online magazines, obviously, because there's not print costs to consider. But I would really love it, any lit mag people out there, I would really love it if there were more markets for long short stories so that writers can get those publications under their belt. So maybe we can get more really cool short fiction collections because, you're not trying to write 20 like small, like 3,000 worders. Like, you've got some that are 10, 15, 20,000 words, and that you maybe had a first life. Maybe they didn't, and that's okay too, because you don't want to publish everything before you put a book out, but it would be nice to see more of them in circulation.
Do you have
I started writing short stories, as Paola says, it's an accessible kind of way in before you have the patience and you have a go at it and see how it goes. I love short stories still, and I haven't written that many lately because novels do take up a lot of your time. So once you step into doing a novel, you're often committed for this long span of time, and it's hard to fit in stories in that time. And then while you're writing this novel, the next novel may come to you, and then that's the next one in the queue. But I find it useful to, like, in between those projects, or sometimes if you get bogged down in the novel, to switch to a short story as well. Why they aren't more popular in the short attention span, I mean, that question, it's difficult to say, because I think I myself, sometimes I feel like getting more immersed when I have my time to read, and something that I've been reading over the last few days or a few weeks or something like that, to get back in when I read again tomorrow. I just read a Lonesome Dove, which is, an 850-page book, and I loved that length. Like, I just love the depth and everything there, to go into that as well, to each night, before I went to sleep, that I was going back into that world. So I can see that as an issue that that maybe the short story, you feel like maybe you're cheating a little bit if you go to the short story instead of you go to, I even have it where I'll move to the novel instead of read a magazine article, because I have some time to read. I've got my Harper's subscription, and I'm never reading through those, but I still am drifting to the novel, even though that's going to be a shorter thing, because I think I want to get back into that vast space as well. So, I'm just thinking out loud here, because I haven't really thought of it in that way, and I'm asking myself why I do that. But I think that may be one of the reasons that the publishers put a lot of pressure on you to, for instance, if you submit a short story collection and the stories are somehow closely linked, they'll encourage you to make them into a novel. So they can put the word novel on the cover as well. I've seen it. It's happened to friends before who've done that. So, obviously that's a marketing decision as well. So we're seeing that.
Thanks, Jay, for letting me publish short stories.
As a publisher, I can answer this question.
Yeah.
So my theory about why the short story doesn't do well from a publishing perspective is because there's two kinds of short story collections. And one is a debut collection. Did you all publish debut collections of short stories?
Yeah.
Right? So you're an unknown author, right? So the publishers go, well, then they sign you for a 2-book deal or whatever. They want you to do the novel next, and you put that out as your second book. It does better than the short story. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that the publishers have created.
Right.
And then the other collection of short stories is something if you've already published for a long time and you've been doing some things on the side in magazines, they get collected into a book. And that doesn't get marketed as much as a full novel.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. And then the other thing that I would say is that we're in Canada.
Yeah.
Canada's national genre is the short story. Our Nobel Prize winner is the short story. And yet, who are the big publishers in Canada? They're not owned by Canadians.
Right.
Right? So there's this kind of, I don't know.
Battle.
There's some things to think about there.
Yeah.
Because for a publisher like me, a collection of short stories does as well as a novel.
Oh, really? Yeah. That is really interesting, Jay. I was just thinking, I've always thought this about short stories. I love short stories, I write short stories, and I'm now in the category of someone who has a bunch of short stories that could be turned into a collection, and I'm trying to convince my current publisher to do that. But agents have told me not to do that, so then I'm like, why not? Like, how is it gonna damage my soaring, well, because they can't make as much money off of it. But I just sort of think like, well, I'm going to damage my soaring career in some way. Like, I don't think so. But I do think, like, aside from the publishing question, just what a short story is, and it seems to me that a short story, if it's done well, is closer to a poetic form than a novel is necessarily. Not that there aren't poetic novels. So everything I'm saying, you can always find examples of, things that belie the comment that I'm about to make. But it seems to me that a short story is a harder form. It's a harder form, not necessarily to write, but to read, because they're more cryptic, they're more elliptical. They ask a little more of the intellect, or even sometimes affectively they ask more, because they're working through as Paola's sort of been demonstrating, like, these stories are all they have these metaphoric values, right? And so the metaphoric value, it requires, you to be kind of bodily immersed in it in a different way than maybe a novel might be, novels tend to be more raggedy and you can live in them for longer and that sort of thing. And a short story just demands you live quickly in it and then you absorb it. And they're not always immediately successful. Sometimes they take a long time to kind of like do their work. They're kind of homeopathic almost. So I just think I just think like it is a harder form, and it demands, even though we're in an attention deficit like kind of era. That's why the novel might work better, because short stories demand more. They just do. Yeah. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
A valuable 2 cents, like $1 worth of 2 cents, I
I
think.
could have used that, homeopathic.
That's old.
That's good, that's good.
Does anyone have any questions before I move on to my fun questions? No? I didn't mean to undercut you with my saying that these are fun questions, but I am always fascinated. Brian, you wrote and performed stand-up comedy, which is incredible.
Say something funny.
And yeah, exactly. I'm always fascinated, interested, in love with short stories that introduce jobs that writers have had in a past life that I find out as a reader, because I'm one of those readers who like the people who watch movies and go spend more time on IMDb than watching the movie. I do that when I'm reading books. And I did that even when I had to look up encyclopedias. I'm that old. I would go to the library and look authors up in books. I'm interested, so talk about your day jobs and how they may have shown up in writing or influenced your writing in some way.
What? I mean, so I'm a database developer. I develop software and stuff like that, and this new thing. I mean, I might as well plug it right now, which is for small press publishers to do the royalties and stuff, which is just, it was built for Coach House Press, and Alana, the editor and publisher there, we have built it into a system for other small presses to use. We have some in the States and some in Canada who are signing on. But the side note to that is that I program in something called FileMaker Pro. It's a database program, and I used it for A Tidy Armageddon because there were about 750 products that are mentioned in the book, and I was trying not to mention things too often or repeatedly, and also the size of the blocks in the book are computed based on actual numbers of those things. So microwave ovens, they're probably in the history of the world, there's been 1 billion microwave ovens have been made. And so I took the size of the microwave oven and multiplied it by 1 billion and figured out how big that block would be. And I just plugged the numbers into my software that I wrote to do that. And so that's kind of just an example of my day job, helping out with my writing as well. My other day jobs, or the other jobs I have are, I think, fairly dull. I was an usher for the Blue Jays for 3 years. Way back in the 80s. I was a waiter very briefly. I was not very good at it, and that's why it was brief. Yeah, in terms of the comedy, I mean, I started when I was in high school. A friend and I, we wrote comedy sketches and stuff together, and that led to a gig at Just for Laughs a really long time ago. I rode in an elevator with Jerry Seinfeld. I met Phyllis Diller. You know, that was kind of a fun thing. That Rowan Atkinson was there, and he met him and stuff like that. But a long time ago, like this Jerry Seinfeld was before Seinfeld, before that. And then other than that, I've done computer office jobs and stuff like that. But I never really write about them because I think they're fairly dull.
But you could put Rowan Atkinson and Jerry Seinfeld in a novel and say,
Of course,
I know them.
yes. Based on my actual experience. With
Right.
Exactly. Jerry stood against the back wall of the elevator, and we did not make eye contact. The doors opened, and I walked in.
But it's fiction.
Oh yeah.
You just build that
You
into
embellish
the
that a
scene.
bit.
Yeah.
When I tell people what I do for a living, it's kind of a downer. I am a teacher. I teach high school. This is not the downer part. You could be. I teach in a program that is very special. If any of you know the education system, there's a clause in it called Section 23. It allows for a care and treatment and custody programs to be there for students who are really at sort of the highest level of risk in boards. I work in a care and treatment program with the Elizabeth Fry Society. I'm the school board teacher, and I get to teach these amazing girls. My classroom is all girls. There's 8 of them, and they are at risk of being trafficked or exploited, or they've gone through that. So yeah, that's the downer part. So I think in terms of what I do for a living, because I've always sort of taught alternative ed, it's influenced this book in 2 ways. One is that I've got 2 stories that are very much based on young characters. One of them you heard tonight, Mermaid Girls. You heard part of that, and the other one is The Silent Grave of Birds, which is a group of adolescent boys and sort of like the toxic vibes that can happen in a group of adolescent boys. Because I taught a lot of behavior programs, and I think sort of it's given me the perspective of youth and looking at sort of things through what they're going through. More than that, to like sort of the work I do with Elizabeth Fry is also probably infused all the way through this book. It's very feminist. There's a sentient sex robot who goes against her misogynistic programming. It comes out in those ways. So that's how my job is in this book.
Thanks. That sounds like an amazing job.
Yeah, I love it. I really
Like
love
challenging,
it.
but amazing. I don't know if there's an intersection exactly between what I do for money and my writing. I teach creative writing at various institutions. right now U of T at Vic College, and before that at the University of Guelph in their MFA program, and also Colorado College, which is a liberal arts college in Colorado Springs. The only real Venn overlap that I can kind of think of is that when I started teaching, I had to suddenly articulate this thing that I've been doing instinctively for some years, and that was a big challenge. And I think there's a wonderful feedback loop that kind of happens when you have to explain to somebody, why not to use a lot of ly adverbs. And I knew, I sort of had a feeling about it, but I didn't quite know why, and so I had to sort of think through why I believed that. And so I think I become a better writer in some sense by articulating what writing is, and that's really it.
Yeah, like being in a workshop and seeing.
Yeah,
Seeing.
You can't just say don't do that. You have to say why I believe maybe this is a better way to do it than this. And so that craft gets better by having to articulate what the craft is, and then the feedback loop is that my own writing gets better because you want to walk the talk.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to end it because I feel like I could probably keep going, and Jess needs to get home. Thank you so much, Jess, for being here for us. Thank you again for coming. I am going to raffle off the last two things that I forgot to bring up here. One of them is Kathryn Mockler's book. She joined us on October 15th for a one-on-one online event. If you missed it, you can find it on our YouTube channel. It was an incredible experience. Anecdotes is a great book. And I'm going to draw for the winner of Anecdotes. And I should add that this particular copy was donated by Patty Scott, who is a writer. He donated an incredible amount, a generous amount of money to that event, with which I purchased 3 copies of Anecdotes for some raffle winners. So the winner of this Anecdotes and a $25 gift card is Kathryn G.
Ooh. It's you, Kathy.
Jared, anyone who bought tickets on Eventbrite got their name put in. And this, I don't know how anyone feels about secondhand books, but I will tell you it was really, 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 really hard for me to pile these books together. These are authors that joined us at Junction Reads last year. These are some of the ones that I'm willing to give up, only because I've purchased books of the next books from these authors. And so Elaine McCluskey's collection of short stories, talk about an incredible collection of short stories, so great. Carrie Fagan's book, another book coming out from Book Hug. Dan K. Woo's book, Margaret Sweatman's book, The Gunsmith's Daughter, and Katie Welch's book, Mad Honey. She's also a great short story writer. So you're gonna get these. I guess they're not really from me, they're probably also from the publisher because they gave them to me. Lex D.
Lexi and I are going home together.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you everybody for coming. It means a lot. I know that Kaylee would be upset that she's missing this. Hopefully her flight lands eventually. Oh, yay. Jess, again, thank you so much for supporting Junction Reads and hosting us. And Kathryn, Paola, and Brian, thank you so much for joining us. I always forget to do this, and Kaylee would be screaming from the back if I left. So on November 2nd, that's this Thursday, I'm going to sit down and talk with Lucy E.M. Black about her latest novel, historical novel, Brickworks. We're going to do an Instagram live. That's 7 p.m. Eastern Time. November 11th, we've got an online event with Genevieve Scott. Her book, Damages, incredible. Side note, she wrote a short story that my 12-year-old daughter starred in the short film of, which is very meta for me. And then November 25th, we're going to be right back here again with Moez Serrani, Sofia Mostagimi, and Jenny Lee Austria Bonifacio. So I hope you can come back for that. And that's it. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And Jared, thank you.
Oh, well, you